Philly Startup Leaders presents Founder Factory 2015. This program was recorded January 13th, 2015 at The Hub at SEER Center in Philadelphia. This year's Founder Factory is brought to you by these sponsors: Broadpath, the Innovation Center at 3401, Startup PHL, and Morgan Lewis. In video number 8, a marketing panel featuring Amanda McGowan of SEER Interactive, Danielle Cohn of Comcast, Sue Spolan of LeadiD, Matthew Ray of ChatterBlast, Nadia James of Griot Digital, and your moderator, Michael Idinopolis of PeopleLinx.
This feels a bit like, I don't know, what, Family Feud? Or what's the... So why don't we do this? If each of you we'll start with Sue. If each of you can just go down the line and tell us kind of who you are. We know who you work for, but tell us again, because we probably have already forgotten, and what you do there.
Okay. I am Sue Spolan. I'm the Director of Content Marketing for a tech startup in Ambler, PA called LeadiD. And I'm former Philly Party Ambassador. A lot of people may know me that way. And it's been tough to live that down. LeadiD, we certify online sales leads with a little bit of JavaScript code that sits on an online sales lead form and has a vision into consumer intent, and we're able to tell what leads are fraudulent and what leads are duplicates and how old leads are, and it's a kind of a technology that has really revolutionized online lead gen.
Hi everyone, my name is Amanda McGowan. I'm here from SEER Interactive, based in Northern Liberties in Philly. I'm an SEO account manager there and also an analytics account manager. At SEER we offer search engine optimization, so we're basically gaining visibility for our clients' websites in organic search. But we also do paid search as well as analytics and content. So definitely here to represent using SEO as a traction channel for startups today.
Hi everyone, Danielle Cohn. I am formerly with the Philadelphia Convention Visitors Bureau, which is how you may know me, but I am now with Comcast and I am leading their entrepreneurial engagement for the company. So curating and celebrating Comcast's spirit of entrepreneurship across all of their markets. I get the honor to work with Sam Schwartz, who's basically the head of innovation for Comcast, and Mark Siri, who many of you know. And my background's in marketing, so you may be wondering why I'm sitting here, but was responsible for marketing the Pennsylvania Convention Center in Philadelphia for the last 20 years.
Hello everybody, my name is Matthew Ray. I am the creative director and one of the founders of ChatterBlast Media. We're a 6-year-old company, so we're out of our startup phase and we're crawling around and getting into all the kitchen cabinets that aren't locked. We basically focus, we're a marketing company, and we basically focus all of our initiatives in the digital and social space. We concentrate on social media engagement, management, creative campaigns, digital storytelling, blogging, content creation, and we're local here, and we just got our 10th employee today.
Hi, my name is Nadia James. I'm the founder of Griot Digital. It's an early stage startup based in Fishtown, Philadelphia. We help businesses lead through defining their purpose, figuring out what it is, sharing it across the web using content marketing.
Awesome, and I can't remember if I said this already. I'm Michael Idinopolis, Chief Marketing Officer at PeopleLinx. We help make social selling easy, so PeopleLinx basically works with sales professionals to automatically guide them to take the right next actions on LinkedIn and Twitter and other social networks. So I'm really excited about this panel, not only because all these folks in front of you are like awesome and brilliant and good looking, but also because we've got a really good kind of, we sort of cover a lot of the landscape just on this panel. So like, we've got some startup people, we've got some big company people. Danielle, do you ever think you could describe as like the big company person on the panel? We got some big company people, we've got some agency people, we've got some search people, we've got some content marketing people, we've got some social people. It's a really, really good kind of representative cross-section of the new world of marketing, and especially the world of marketing for young startups, which of course is what this event, what this day is all about. So let me get right to it, starting with, and I'll just ask each of you, specifically in startups, what is the role of marketing? Like, why are you important? Why do they pay you? I'm making a bit of an assumption there, but why do they pay you to market a startup? Start with you.
I always refer to Martha Stewart, who is nothing more than a human being and incredibly well marketed, and everybody knows who she is. So why market? Why not be Martha Stewart? You need to be known in the world. You need to be thought of in high regard by prospects, strangers, potential customers. And if a tree falls in the forest and no one hears, then that's what it's like, a company without marketing.
I'd have to say I have a different definition specifically for startups, just because the startups I've worked with in SEO a lot of times have an idea of who their audience should be, and I think marketing for startups is actually realizing who your audience is. And luckily with search engine optimization, we've been able to, through trial and error, to determine that, because unfortunately, a lot of times startups are wrong in who they actually think their target audience is. So realizing their audience.
Great, and I'd say in addition to that, getting new customers. That's how you prove yourself to investors and people who will buy your product. But I think for startups, you're all marketing people, whether you want to be or not. And a lot of CEOs or founders are not always the most extroverted in themselves. And I think sometimes marketing teams or an individual can bring that to the table and be a good balance in taking your story and making sure that more people know about it and that you're well networked.
That was really what I was going to say. Yes, I would add on to that, add on to everything that everybody said, and then kind of take what Danielle said. I'm sure many of you are gifted engineers, thought leaders, experts, geniuses, venture fund pirates, whatever you're doing, but you might not be the best public relations executive, you might not be able to write ad copy, you might not be able to make all the right connections. And so you do need marketing, and everyone here has established why, but why you would approach other agencies to do marketing for you is simply because you might not be able to do it yourself, and you might not be able to do it as well as you want to. And with this precious organization and this idea that you've created, don't you really want it to be done right? And your job as a leader is to pick the best team, and that doesn't necessarily mean you all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. What I would just add is that whether you're selling to someone who is sitting behind a desk or walking down an aisle, they have hundreds of options that are very similar to what you're selling. So you have to be able to differentiate yourself. And as someone else just said, when you're a startup, it is kind of hard to figure out what your story is. I actually, all of my clients, I help them with figuring out what their story is, and it's taken me time just by discovering and working with them to realize what my story is, but you also need to make sure that you're raising awareness with even that little bit of granular detail that you have that differentiates you. That's how you're going to get those sales, and you need to just focus on that and continue to pivot and refine.
So Amanda, I want to go back to something that you said that was very provocative. So you said, and I quote, startups are often wrong in thinking who their target buyer is.
At least the startups that I've worked with.
So okay, well, tell us more about that. So how does that happen? Like, are we stupid? Are we misguided? Like, how do you not know who you're trying to sell to?
Well, the way it happened for one client in particular for us was by accident. So we had the kickoff with them. They explained to us who their target audience was, and we were on board with that, and that's who we started targeting. And then oddly enough, they were picked up in a couple different publications. And then the referral traffic that we got from the same article was republished in 2 very different publications. One we had worked tirelessly to get them featured on. And we thought, wow, this is going to do great. We're going to get so much referral traffic, and they're going to get a ton of revenue, which didn't happen. And then the same article, just by accident, happened to be republished in a completely different publication, a completely different industry, and did phenomenally well for them. So that was sort of an eye-opening experience for us, and we admitted to them, we thought our original audience was X, when really it was Y. So other times we do, based on data and research, reveal to them, we might actually want to go in a different direction, but sometimes it's just by accident. So depends.
Other panelists, how common is that in your experience? Is what Amanda's describing, is that unusual? Is that common?
I'd say that's pretty common. For me, my first couple clients were consultants, like government, and then like lawyer, education consultant, and I was like, oh, yeah, this works. I want to help, smaller businesses. And then I realized, well, they can't really fully utilize all of the services that I'm offering, so they're not my target audience. So then I had to rethink, well, who could be my target audience? And that's when I shifted more to trying to serve tech startups. But I think what you need to consider is, well, how big is their need? What is everyone else doing? What are their challenges right now? Because as a founder or leader of a company, you're thinking about many different things. Marketing may not be the top of your list right now, but for another industry, that may be what they really need to nail down right now, whatever your service is.
So I'm curious to hear from the audience, like, show of hands, how many of you who have done startups or are doing startups, like, how many of you have had the experience of waking up in the morning and realizing, oh shit, we've been selling to the wrong people? All right, a few. How many of you feel like, you know what? How many of you have been through the experience where the people you ended up selling to are exactly the people you thought you were selling to, and you sort of made it successfully through, however you want to define success, you made it successfully through all the way without pivoting once in terms of who your target buyer was or your target buyer profile was? Anyone? Wow. Any hands? Zero. Interesting. So the reason why I'm so interested in this is very much consistent with my experience as well. And it does make me wonder, like, as marketers, aren't we always, as startup marketers, aren't we always sort of skating on thin ice? Because we're always marketing to who we think the buyer is, but then we might wake up one day and have that realization that we've been marketing to the wrong folks. And that's very different from a more established company where you pretty much kind of know who your buyer is because you've sold to hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of them. So how do you think about that ambiguity? Yep. Sue?
A lot of times, even within my company, so previous to the company that I work for, I was a reporter. I worked at NPR. I worked for online publications, and then I also worked for a content marketing agency, and now I'm in-house doing content marketing just for this one company. So I have both kinds of experience. What I found recently within this company, though, is that exact mindset where people are like, hey, we should be marketing to this very, very specific vertical. And I think, okay, this person who is not in the vertical is going to show up on our website and look at our blog and say, this has nothing to do with me, I'm out, I'm done. So my strategy is to do like the shotgun approach, do as wide a swath as possible of topics and content that appeals to like the highest common denominator. I think that's right. The largest number of people within the potential customer base for us, so that somewhere in there is going to be something for the person that we are wanting to find eventually. It's crazy to me. For example, the most popular blog post on LeadiD is "Bot or Not," and it's about fraud and bots. And came up with it one day. Well, we've got like 10 times more hits for that than anything else. Now, as far as did these people turn into marketing qualified leads? Maybe. The idea, however, is that the more marketing qualified leads, or I'm sorry, the more leads you attract, the more marketing qualified leads you end up attracting, and then the more sales qualified leads you end up attracting. So when you're in that funnel, you want to go really wide, and then you can eventually get much more granular in terms of who you're targeting and understanding who you really want to target.
Cool. Other comments? Matthew, you looked like you were sort of leaning forward, getting ready to say something.
Do you want to sing?
Matthew's going to sing for us.
I think the nicest part about marketing today, and I come out of PR, so my background's in PR and then added into it marketing. So how much is free to do right now, and that you can take risks and try things. And you may not know who your customer is, or you think it is one piece, but then you can sort of afford more to make a mistake and try a different channel and try a new audience, especially, you know, in SEO and SEM through SEER, through public relations, through your own social media, what works on Twitter, what works on Facebook, what works on Instagram, and everything in between. So I think also you have a lot of options to fail, and like the lean startup, you can fail fast and fail often and move on and try something new, whether it's a headline or whatever it is.
I think we all have to remember, even though we may be smaller companies or startups or, you know, bootstrapping, that we kind of at some points have to look at the market and our own business in the same way that Comcast does, and that we have to continue to look for whether it's new products or new ideas, and we always have to be pivoting. That you might have something that sets the world on fire this year, but if you're not continuing to pivot and innovate and think about consumer trends, you're going to be Kodak. Does everybody remember Kodak? And they were not a startup. I can name another 10. So listening to the public, listening to your consumers, probably not even calling them consumers, but listening to the people who are your stakeholders, who are using your product or using your services, and finding out what they want. And they can tell you, they're telling you right now, and that will allow you to pivot, but you do have to. Pivoting is the only way you'll stay competitive. It's the only way that you're going to continue to succeed. And I think that's a problem that faces startups, because it seems like one more thing we have to lift, and there's only a few of us to do that, but it faces huge corporations and Fortune 500s in just the same way. They just have a lot more ants to lift it.
Actually, I was thinking along the same lines, but what I would say is that people tell you whether they like what you're doing or not by just if they engage or not. And the beauty of digital marketing is that you can track everything. You can see who goes onto the page. What you should be doing is tagging your content to see what themes and messages really resonate with them. Someone said that you should cast a wide net. Cast a wide net in that you're not necessarily saying, you know, business consultants, this is a problem you're facing. Don't do that, but address specific problems and see which problems really hit a nail. And that's what you focus on, and that's how you're pivoting, and you're always learning.
All right, so I like this. So I think the message that I'm getting from kind of that series of comments was, it's all about, you know, marketing these days it's not about launching the space shuttle, spending a lot of money on some one big project that you know is going to be a blockbuster. It's more like, look, we live in a world where you can do a lot of things with a lot of tools. They might not all work. In fact, they almost certainly won't all work, but the tools are cheap, they're readily available, the turnaround times are quick. So just keep trying, keep innovating, stick with what's working, drop what's not working. So I like that a lot. And let's drill down a little bit on specifics. So I'm curious, for each of you, what is your favorite example of a successful marketing, fill in the noun, campaign, stunt, trick, idea, cool thing that you've seen that was basically free? Could be your own idea, could be somebody else's idea, could be somebody else's idea, but you can say it was your idea because we won't even know.
I can start off.
Yeah, Amanda?
Oh, thank you. For one of the startups that we had when we kicked off, they had really big ego keywords that they wanted to rank for, and they were in the luxury watch space. They were actually a buyer and seller of luxury watches.
What is ego? What is an ego keyword?
An ego keyword is when a startup company wants to rank for a term like Rolex. That's an ego keyword. It's ineffective. A lot of times those keywords don't convert, and they're branded. So usually that brand is ranking for it. So the first 6 months, we attempted to do this with this client and struggled horribly. And then it was actually touched on earlier today with Bob from RJ Metrics, but we decided to take more of a long tail approach. One, because it was much easier to get those terms, a lot less competitive. But two, because we actually looked at their analytics data and we found that the majority of their conversions were actually coming from terms or phrases that had 5 words or more in them. So we actually started making, we had originally started out with content around who's wearing, what Rolex is James Bond wearing in the most recent James Bond movie. And those drove thousands of traffic to their site, but none of it converted. So then we changed our content strategy to focus solely on the long tail searches, and we made half as much content, and the conversion rate went up tremendously. And that was purely from looking at 2 years worth of analytics data that they had and going after the majority of keywords that were designated as having 0 search volume in the tool called Keyword Planner. So definitely a big advocate for startups to go after long tail. I think that's a strategy that can apply to a lot of different industries. So that's one success story there.
So this is an example, and for those of you who are younger than me in this room, you may not know these times, but there was a time when there was no internet or email, and you had to write a press release, and you actually had to mail it out across the country. Could you imagine that? Snail mail. So the city was looking for a way to put the 4th of July on the map, and it was 1998, right after the 4th of July, and we were planning for 1999. And I just totally aged myself. But we were all sitting around at lunch, and I think I was the one who said, hey, let's put out a press release that says, were you born on the 4th of July? Philadelphia's looking for you. And we'll run a contest and try and get all these people from around the country to Philadelphia to do the photo of the century, is what it was called. And it was sponsored by Kodak. But in the end, one press release was 1 page, ended up getting picked up all over the world. And my claim to fame was I crashed the city phone system. There was no email, so we gave out a phone number, a 215 phone number, and it crashed the city phone system. We got like 10,000 calls in an hour, and then we received something like 40,000 applications through the mail, and then had to sort through them. And at the time, the mayor, Rendell, wanted to physically sit with us in the room and vet through all of the applicants. And in the end, 1999, the very first event of the millennium was called the Photo of the Century, presented by Kodak. It took place at 7:04 in front of Independence Hall. 100 people born on the 4th of July. 1 born each year of the century, from a baby born that morning at Jefferson, who I personally went and talked their crazy family from Fishtown, before it was cool Fishtown, into coming and bringing their baby in an incubator with the Jeffstat to Independence Hall, to a woman who had flown in from Florida who was 99 that morning. And the photo took on a life of its own and got picked up all over the world and was featured in a bunch of magazines, and ended up in the National Enquirer, which I was so excited about. It was like a real story in the National Enquirer. We didn't create a book, but that was by far, it all started with 1 press release. That's all it takes. You can do that with 1 press release.
Make something up? I'm going to make something up. No. Since we're beating Kodak down, just constant talk about Kodak. Is there anybody from Kodak here? Did they sponsor it today? One of my favorite things that my company has successfully done to death for clients, and each time we trot it out as if it's a new idea, don't tell anybody, is we've taken the Kodak moment spot. Does anybody remember this from visiting your favorite amusement park as a child? And there would be a little plaque that say, this is where you and your family pose, and you take your Kodak special moment, and that's all wonderful. They were all over Disney World and Hershey Park, where I grew up. I grew up in Hershey Park, actually. Last year true story. Last year we took this idea and we made it a selfie spot, and we really pushed it out to the world at the flower show, because we knew there's two things, and Danielle's story touched upon this. There's two things America likes. It's pictures and narcissism. And they're going to take a picture. They're going to take a picture of themselves. They're probably going to take a picture of your product. And you really can't, you don't want to have an Instagram account there pushing out your product. Look at my new solar-powered backpack. Won't it be great for you? Because who cares? I'm not following that Instagram feed. But I am following a million other people's Instagram feeds. So figuring out, and back to the free thing, figuring out how to get people to interact with your product or your people or your services or your logo or your hashtag and generate their own content, that's kind of free. Coming up with the scheme of getting people to talk about you, that might cost. Unless you get me drunk, and then I'll tell you maybe for free, or you can just steal what I just told you. But getting people to talk about your product, getting people to participate and tell other people your product, that's really for free. And that's a huge generator. How do you get people to post on their mommy blog read by 7 people? I really love this app. How do you get other people to take pictures of your stuff? That's really where free marketing can really, really take off.
Cool. So, am I on? Dead battery.
There you go.
That sounds bad. All right. Thanks. So, Matthew, what you just talked about sounds a lot like buzz, right? And everybody in startups is always like chasing the elusive buzz, right? We want to be buzz. We want our company to be buzzy. We want people to be buzzing about us. But like when I compare that to, Amanda, what you said, you were like looking for much more sober metrics, MQLs, closable leads, all the stuff that like the accounting department gets very excited about. So, and Danielle, you mentioned before that like the job of marketing is to drive revenue. But like buzz and revenue are they're two different things and they're two different objectives. So I guess my question is, in a world of limited resources, and let's face it, like if you're doing startups, you are all about limited resources. Like where should you be focusing? Should you be focusing on building the brand and the buzz and being cool and kind of who really cares about how it's affecting the bottom line as long as everybody knows that we're here? Or should you be thinking about, no, this is about getting money. This is about getting revenue, getting to profitability. Forget the buzz. What matters is bringing in the business. So again, in a perfect world, you have enough resources to go after both, but we don't live in that world. So how do you think about the trade-off of buzz versus revenue generation?
Who wants it?
Who wants it?
You want it?
I want it. Yeah, obviously you need to have both. I think that the first piece of all this is telling a good story. A lot of people think, oh, my product's too dry, I don't have a good story, but I will point you to Wolf of Wall Street. That is a movie that is basically a bunch of SEC papers, and it's an amazing story, and it's a wild ride. So no matter what kind of company you have, you can create a fascinating and compelling story. And that's kind of like, to me, both pieces of it, because once you do create that story and you're creating buzz, but then you're also attracting potential revenue and you're attracting investors.
And one thing to add to that, at least from an SEO perspective, I think you can do both. It just takes a little bit more time, or a lot more time, depending on how competitive your industry is. For one client in particular, we had gotten buzz on a lot of smaller blogs, and then we had formed a connection with a Forbes writer. And all we did was reach out and just let him know about the concept of the startup. We weren't pushing anything on him. We just knew this was his niche in Forbes. So we let him know. We just said, if you ever cover anything in the future, let us know if you need any data or any info on the industry. And then, months and months and months had passed, and he eventually reached out to us and mentioned us maybe in one sentence in the article, and that one link back to their site ended up getting them over $60K in revenue in 3 months. So not only did we get the buzz, but we got the revenue too. So you can definitely do both. It's just you don't have the money, but you have the time. So put the time in and you'll probably get both.
Yeah, I'd agree and say that as startups, while you don't have a lot of money, I think you rely more on PR. That's why PR is free. That's why it's in existence. And actually, the best way to maximize PR is to find trends and don't just feel like you've got to be the only one in the marketplace. So if you see similar products, wearables as an example, I'll give a shout out to the Beacon, very cool product. There are a lot of wearables, and they've been smart on their PR approach because they're coupling with other wearables that they know they'll end up getting picked up in stories about. Because a lot of times, porters don't want to just write about one company, but they'll write about a trend. So you can become a part of a trend. That's a very, very important part. Don't just feel like you're out there on your own. And then the other side of it is, if you have investors, your investors want to know that you are making money at some point. So the revenue side has to be there. You can't just have buzz and no revenue.
I think everyone hopes that buzz leads to revenue, and ideally revenue should lead to buzz. There should be like a loopy thing. I think as entrepreneurs and leaders, you have to recognize which do you really want. And I hate to spill anybody's coffee, but not all of you really care about the product you're working on right now. Some of you want to be famous. Some of you want to be rich. Some of you are going to have another product next year. That's okay. But you have to identify what you really want out of the whole game, and that'll lead you to, do I want buzz? Do I want revenue? Like, if you just want to be famous, well, all you want is buzz. Who cares? We'll get you on TV. Shark Tank's available. There you are, and your name's in lights. If you want revenue, you may never actually get a headline. You just may consistently sell a really, really decent product and nobody knows who you are. And that's okay. Both are totally okay, but you have to identify which you want. It's kind of the Jack Welch versus the Jack Dorsey situation. Who do you want to be and why? And they're both rich. One's a little richer than the other. And they're both famous. One's a little more famous than the other. But they went about it in different ways, and that's okay. Just recognize that, make sure your partners recognize that, your board and your investors know what you're up to, and then it's okay to go after one. It's okay to say, we are just gonna get buzz, and then who cares where this goes? Or, I don't wanna ever be in the Philadelphia Business Journal, I just wanna sell 1 million units every month. Both are totally fine.
Yeah, that's a good point. That also makes me think of when the talk about that Boomi was having, or the Boomi's business structure, how no one knew about their product at all. It was all white labeled, but they were still able to, get acquired. So I think you have to think about who your target customer is. If they care about you being recognizable and you having credibility within certain spaces or being, in Forbes or whatever, then yeah, you probably want to try and get on Forbes. You don't need to spend a lot of money, like right off the bat going for PR, but you do need to try and start building relationships that will get you in front of those people who can serve as your customers or your partners or your investors.
So I think part of what I'm taking away from that is there are different approaches. There isn't a right answer or a wrong answer, but alignment is really important. So alignment within the team, And especially if you've got investors, alignment with your investors, right? There is nothing more painful than watching an entrepreneur go present to their investors and say, look at what an awesome job we're doing. You know, look at the web traffic we have generated. We're killing it. And the investors are like, but where are the sales? Or conversely, when the entrepreneur comes in and says, look at how we're doing on sales. We brought in $275,000 this quarter. And the investors are like, why are you wasting your time generating revenue? You should be grabbing market share. This is all about hitting home runs, and you're worried about $275,000. So alignment is really important. No right or wrong answer, but make sure that all the key decision makers agree going in. So let me now do something slightly unfair, which is, as I said at the beginning of the session, many of you, I mean, you sort of come from lots of different backgrounds. We've got some content marketing, we've got some search, we've got some agency, we've got some startup, we've got some social. In a way, you are kind of an illustration of many of the different traction levers that Gabe talks about in the book, right? So if you read the book, it talks about how, you know, each of these is a traction lever. You know, you can use PR to get traction. You can use social media to get traction. You can use search to get traction. But I'll come back to what I keep saying. Startups are a limited resources game, almost by definition. You cannot afford to put all your chips on social and all your chips on search and all your chips on content marketing and all your chips on PR. You just can't, and all your chips on events. We haven't talked about events. You can't do it. So here's my unfair question, because each of you has an institutional bias, but I'll ask the question anyway. So you're an entrepreneur. You've just started a company. You've got, you know, a little bit of money from friends, family. Maybe you've got a couple of angel investors. You can spend your money in one category, but not in, maybe in two, but probably not in three or four. Where do you spend that money? And how do you think about making that decision? Who will be brave enough?
I'm going to say business development and networking.
I agree. Find the party. That's free. And a long tail search, I think, is really important, and I'm sure you'll speak to that.
Yeah, I don't know. That one really just depends, because I have talked to some people where search wasn't the best option for them as a startup. So I don't want to be biased, but I'd say whatever you pick, just don't half-ass it. I see so many people trying to do 6 different marketing channels at once, and then they all fail because they're not dedicating enough time to any single one of them. So just pick one and don't half-ass it.
I'm going to agree with everybody who said network, volunteer, be a good person, put yourself out there, really, really work hard at becoming a community member, becoming involved in whatever community you want to be involved in, be a leader, really put all your efforts for your first year and a half to 2 behind those things. Get your name, get your personal name and your personal brand out there. Get people to trust you and trust what you're saying, and then layer in the rest after that.
Yeah, I would actually say content marketing and networking events, just because the content marketing just continues to validate your credibility online, and then in person, you're validating your credibility by which are, you know, the discussions you're having.
All right, so let me close with a general question for each of you. So suppose you're at an event like this one, and an entrepreneur, like many of the people in this room, comes up to you at the end of the event and says, "Oh, that was so great. You know, you clearly know a lot about marketing. I really enjoyed your panel, but I really don't feel I know anything about marketing. If you could give me one piece of advice as a startup entrepreneur about marketing, what's the one thing I need to know as I think about how to market my new venture?"
I can start off with that one. and this is, again, from an SEO perspective, but I think the biggest thing you can do is just answer your customer's question all too often, and it can even be something really simple as how much does it cost? People tend to avoid answering customers' questions because they kind of want to reel them in first, and then once they get them hooked, give them all the details. So give them the information they're looking for, give them information that's shareable, but also give them information that's going to make them feel secure in purchasing whatever you're offering or registering for whatever service you're putting out there.
My one piece of advice would be to build relationships, and that would really cover anything: social media, content marketing, events, any area that you'd be wanting to make yourself known. Because it's the human-to-human piece of it that is really going to sell your product.
I'd echo that and just say, as you build your network, learn from your network. As someone who was starting my own startup in the healthcare space 4 years ago, this community, the Philly Startup Leaders, was so helpful. Everybody met with me, would take the time to teach me, and I was not on my own. People like Bob Mal, Chris Sierra, anybody who I could learn from. They took the time, and I think if you take the time to learn from them, there's a lifelong friendship that starts and continues.
I'm going to be boring and echo everything that everyone said. Yes, relationships. Yes, allowing yourself to be mentored. Then pass it back and mentor somebody. When we're all in startup phases, we sometimes think that interns equal slave labor, and that's the exact opposite. These are people who will later be leaders. They will later run companies and organizations. A former intern actually recommended me to speak here today. So these are the mentor other people in whatever position they're at in their life, age, or whatever, like you have been mentored, and you will see that continue.
Yeah, the one thing that I would add is just when you're first starting your business, you kind of are a consultant with every sale. You're not IBM, so you can't just say, here's a new service, and people are going to say, ooh, what's from IBM? I'll buy it. No. No one knows who you are, so you have to educate. And I would just basically focus on, with my marketing, well, how am I making sure that I'm positioning myself as the expert in the space, or showing that, my product or service is, really top notch, because you have to prove that with whatever you're doing.
All right, and that's where we'll leave it. I'd like to thank our panelists, Sue Spolan from LeadiD, Amanda McGowan from SEER Interactive, Danielle Cohn from Comcast, Matthew Ray from ChatterBlast, and Nadia James from Griot Digital. Thank you all very much. I hope everyone enjoyed this and learned as much as I did. I certainly got a lot out of that.
We hope you enjoyed this program. For more information on Founder Factory and the Philly Startup Leaders, visit phillystartupleaders.org. We produce this program in the studios of the Lubetkin Media Companies in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. On the web at beingthemedia.com. For everyone at Philly Startup Leaders and the Lubetkin Media Companies, this is Steve Lubetkin. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you out there on the net. Take good care.